The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. One of my favorite books. This is, if I had to pick 10 books I thought everybody should read. Now there might be series in there just for cheating. This might be one of them. It's interesting because I went to a seminar so long ago, 15 or more years ago. I was just barely first on this journey. I had already spent almost 4 years in a private university studying art history and thinking I was becoming cultured. Never even discovered the great books or liberal education or any of that. I still had all of my education to get ahead of me. And I went to this seminar, and the speaker said, he asked us at the end of the seminar, he said, write down, if you were stranded on a desert island or you had to evacuate your city or whatever it was, what are the 10 books you would take with you? And I was so poorly read I didn't know. I could maybe name books I had read, and there were a few I thought of, but I couldn't say that I had read enough good things that I knew what would continue to nourish me. Now, it's a strange thing for me to say that I would take The Road Less Traveled with me because it's pop psychology and because people take issue with Scott Peck, and I'm going to say that I'm one of them. Okay? He gave an interview, which I will link if I can find it. I think I can find it, which I will link to this post, because he talks about the interviewer asks him, okay, so you had a problem with alcoholism, you were unfaithful to your wife multiple times, and he even after this book was written and they republished, and it was a footnote in here. It's a footnote in here, and it might have been I don't think it was in the original edition, I'm not sure, where he talks about the value of open marriage. And he talks about how he would sleep with one of his clients if he felt if he knew for a fact that it would genuinely facilitate their growth. Now, that's the worst I can throw out there about Scott Peck, and I'm just going to get that out there before I do this review, because I want everybody to know that I'm fully informed on who he is and who he was, and that I don't think he was perfect or an angel or by any means. It's interesting because the interviewer's like, what are you going to say to people that are like, you're talking about, because what he's talking about is how to be mentally healthy and the role that discipline plays and how we've got to be disciplined if we're going to be happy. And he said, I never told anybody to follow my example. Now, for what it's worth, this is my personal opinion about Scott Peck. He has 2 or 3 other books some things in this book, some things in People of the Lie, the first part of that book, and he's got one on euthanasia that really taught me very important things that changed my perspective and my thinking on certain things. But understand, I'm still very grounded in God and my own religion, okay? So I'm personally, I'm a Christian, so I'm still very much about that. It's not that he's distorted my worldview. It's that I've been able to take truth. You know, sometimes we're resistant to this. Sometimes we're resistant to learning from people of other worldviews because we're afraid they're going to distort ours. It doesn't have to be that way. You can be grounded. Be grounded first in what you know is true and right, but then learn truth from everyone. So what I'm going to say is that I believe that when he wrote this book, he was probably more spiritually and emotionally fit and healthy than maybe he was later on. And that this was a time in his life he actually converted. He had converted to the idea of God before he wrote this, and then he converted to Christianity really soon after he wrote it. And that says something about how he was growing. Now, I think he went too far. He's trying to marry. It's pop psychology, and psychologists and psychiatrists don't like it because it's too spiritual. But it's actually, that's where I believe it's valuable, is that he's trying to take psychological concepts and bridge the gap. And he's one of very few very eminent, intelligent, well-educated, and experienced psychologists or psychiatrists that actually try to do that. And it's interesting because if you go to any self-help shelf, you're going to find that on those shelves, some of the best men in this camp are publishing self-help books. 5 Love Languages is another example of a great guy. I'm just almost positive that he's a grounded Christian, very great, family man, all that kind of stuff, and a practicing psychologist. But he probably publishes in magazines, in the periodicals and all that kind of stuff of the profession, but when it comes down to it, he's not like as respected by the other professionals, and yet he has this mass appeal. Scott Peck is that same way. He has mass appeal because he abandons some of those, some of that psychological language and some of the conclusions there, and he says, I'm just going to actually try to figure out what's true. So, all of that background on Scott Peck being given, there are some phenomenal insights in this book. Obviously, I do not agree that anybody should ever be unfaithful to their spouse for any reason ever. I do not agree with open marriage. I don't think he should say he's going to sleep with the... How would being unfaithful to your primary commitment be beneficial to anybody? It would never be. So I'm trying to be very principle-based as I read. But especially book 1. That is my very favorite part. Now, he does have a chapter on worldviews, which I also think is valuable. Worldviews and religion. And the last part is on grace. I do not agree with all his conclusions, but I'm telling you, there's some truth in this book. In the different sections, the worldviews is valuable. In a book group that's going to go over worldviews, I'll probably throw it in there when I do a book group program on that. But part 1 is called Discipline. It's section 1. It's only 70 or 80 pages, and if you buy it and you only ever read that. Now, also, his definition of love is still my very favorite definition I've ever read. So, I don't agree with everything he says about love, although I do agree with much of it, especially when he talks about the importance of paying attention and the role of listening and those kinds of things. I definitely believe that's part of love. But this section 1 on discipline is beautiful, and this is what was so, like, I want to use the word validating. Because I'm reading psychologists of all different sorts, and I'm looking at what Freud taught, and I'm thinking, how in the world are people buying into some of the stuff he's saying? Well, what Peck does is he says, being mentally healthy is actually much more common sense than we want to say it is. And being mentally healthy is about discipline. And that people go insane. Sometimes they're born with it. Sometimes it's innate, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's actually the consequence of really poor life choices. In other words, you disobey your conscience long enough, you ignore right and wrong long enough, you don't listen to natural law, you don't listen to your own common sense, you don't want to deal with the realities of life, and you will go insane. You will become, your mental state will be out of harmony with reality. That's really what being insane is, right? Like, your mental processes and the way that you approach life is fundamentally out of sync with how life is. And to the degree that we are out of sync with the reality of the planet that we live on and the things that govern human nature, the more pain we're going to be in and create for ourselves, and then eventually we're going to be insane. We're going to go insane. So that's what the discipline chapter is the discipline section is all about. And there's 4 concepts that he talks about that will help you stay mentally awake and alert and happy and thriving. And there's a couple things that I don't know. And balancing is kind of difficult to understand. But when it comes to dedication to truth and trying to escape our freedom and the importance of responsibility and self-discipline, I really believe there's a lot he has to say that is absolutely spot on. I use this a lot of the time. We use it with people that we mentor. We use it in programs and classes because he says things in a certain way, and then he gives valuable stories that back up what he's teaching, and I believe that in a lot of ways. He's absolutely right. So, this is one of my very tops, and I know that some of the things that he is and does may be disturbing to people, but I want you to try to listen to what he has to say that's true and learn from his experiences, because he's really... He's really spot on in some very important key aspects of life that will help you if you can understand and live them. So, The Road Less Traveled, Scott Peck. See you next time.